Thank you. Yes, I'm Kayleigh Swords, and I am the Research Information System Manager at Mary Immaculate College in Limerick. And my presentation is about the lessons learned from using Pure to complete the Republic of Ireland Higher Education Research and Development Survey. So just a little bit about Mary Immaculate College first, for anyone who is not familiar with it. We are a college of education and the liberal arts. We have two campuses, one in Limerick and one in Tipperary, and we cater to approximately 5,000 students across both undergraduate and postgraduate programs. And we employ approximately 200 full-time permanent academics. We're currently in the implementation phase of our Pure project. We completed the rollout of staff profiles in July, and we had intended for our portal to go live at the end of September, but due to some unforeseen circumstances that was delayed, and it went live today. So, good timing in that. Just a very brief bit about what the HERD survey is. It's a biennial report on the research activity at Republic of Ireland higher education institutions that's returned to the Higher Education Authority, and our report this year was submitted in May. The survey itself consists of two parts: a financial questionnaire on the research funding received by the institutions during the relevant reporting period, and a personnel questionnaire of the researchers and the research students that are at the institution during that period as well. So my presentation concentrates on the completion of the personnel questionnaire of this report, because we don't have the financial information in Pure at this time. So, what information does the personnel questionnaire require? I'm not going to go through the list. It's there if anyone wants to look at it later, but as you can see, there's a lot that it looks for on it. But the information that we used Pure to take out, to complete the report with on this occasion was we used it for departments, for the total number of permanent staff and their gender and PhD status, the contract full-time lecturers and the postdoctoral researchers. We didn't use it for, this part actually went really very smoothly. We were able to create a report that contained all of the relevant people for the specified time period, their departments and their qualifications. And I was able to download it to Excel. Very small amount of work to use formulas to calculate the necessary totals and plug it into the return spreadsheet. What we didn't use it for was the research student data. We haven't rolled out to our research students yet. We didn't use it to calculate the percentage of time spent on research by staff, because we have a set percentage for everyone. They all have the same time, and we didn't use it for support staff because they also aren't in Pure. And we didn't use it for the research classification codes that we're required to return information on. These are the particular codes in question. The reason that we didn't use it for it on this occasion is because at the time that the report needed to be completed, we hadn't rolled it out to everyone yet. So that meant the publications were that were in this. There weren't all the publications in the system, so it wasn't an accurate source of information. So on this occasion, I picked the codes that broadly represented the research I was aware of being conducted in the department. But for future reporting, I'd like to be able to say what's actually happening more accurately, and that's what the main focus of the rest of the presentation is about. My wonderful plan. The plan was to upload schemas for each of the three classification types previously mentioned, and to have them visible on the individual research outputs as keywords. Then, when the research outputs were being validated, I could classify each output and assign the relevant codes. For this project, I validated around 500 outputs, which is about a fifth of the publications that were currently in our system. I then set up the keyword groupings so that the categories could also be selected on the organizational units, and that meant then that the codes appearing on the research outputs would become suggestions on the organization units, similar to how the SDGs work. And it would only require me to accept them on the organization then, rather than manually adding them to the organization. And at that point then, I could generate a report which showed all the keywords for each department and use that to complete the survey. However, this turned out not to be as straightforward as I'd hoped. In terms of validating the research itself, it significantly slowed things down in some cases. I needed to read an awful lot of the abstracts in more detail to get a better sense of what the research itself was about. Specifically for the Research Ireland classifications, it contains a huge list, and at times it was quite difficult to categorise the research at the appropriate sub-level. For example, an area I have very little knowledge on is mathematics, and the language being used in those abstracts was so domain-specific that I could only assign a top-level code rather than a more specific one based on the actual research. There's also no way to see which codes are coming from what person when it goes up to the organisation unit. So if someone leaves and that type of research isn't being conducted in that department anymore, it would mean I'd have to go back in, check the person's record, find out which ones they were, and remove them. There's also no way to set a time period on it. So if, for example, you say X, Y, and Z codes were associated with the unit in 22 or academic year 22 and 23, but only Z was relevant for academic year 23, 24. You can't set that kind of a time on it. It's literally what's there right now is what comes up. And then as there were a significant number of options within the RCI codes, and while the HEA asked us to classify it down to the lowest sub-level, in the report itself, the HERD survey report that we have to return, we can only return 1 or 2 top-level codes because there isn't room for any more. So that means in order to get a representative view of the kinds of research areas that the outputs are linked to, we'd need to count how many times a specific code came up, how many times it was used, and work back up to the top-level category for that section. And that wasn't something that I was able to do here. It wasn't an option. So that last part really was the biggest challenge for me, and something I didn't think would be quite so difficult. So my attempts to try and resolve that last counting problem, the first one was to create a report using the organisation units as the driver, but including the publications and the keywords as well. It didn't work how I'd like it to work, because when I downloaded it to Excel, all the publications were coming into Excel in one cell, and they weren't lined up with the correct keywords. So it was all mixed up. My second attempt then was to use the keyword groupings to suggest the keywords to the person record itself instead, and then to create a report using the person as the driver. And containing the department and keywords. But it had the same problem as with the organisation units. You couldn't count how many times the relevant keywords came up, and the concern with that is that you might end up giving prominence to lesser used codes, something that might have only come up once instead of ones that came up multiple times. My final attempt then was made after the more recent changes to the reporting module, and these changes then allowed me to create a report and select a number of things together, which worked much better. And these are the things then that I selected in the image across. It was the publication title, classification code, the person, the year of publication for filtering purposes, and the organisation unit. So while this didn't do 100% what I was looking for, it was the closest thing to what I wanted to accomplish. So I ran with this, but there were a few limitations as well. So we have a few departments in our system that have a parent-child relationship. And for the HERD report, the child is considered part of the larger department, and you need to have them consolidated together. And within the report itself, there was no way for me to do that. The filtering didn't work quite how I thought it would. When I selected the associated content with my driver, it didn't allow me to then filter the person data for their affiliation period. I tried adding the person affiliation data as additional columns, and to filter it there, but that didn't properly filter out the other records that I didn't want for the period. And then due to this, I ended up using the publication status itself, status date, and that got me pretty close, but it relies on the date being accurate in that it needs to have the month at least as well, because we're looking at academic years, just 2023 isn't enough. I also couldn't find a way to exclude publications where the organisation unit was blank. These appeared to be for people who had external organisation affiliations during the time period, and obviously we didn't want those, we only want to report on our own. However, I decided to go ahead and download this report into Excel and interrogate it from there. So there were a number of steps required in order to generate the information for the Excel report spreadsheet. The data needed to be cleaned initially, so all the codes for each individual publication came into Excel in one cell again, and they needed to be separated out. Then the multiple departments were also in one cell, and they needed to be separated out, and the relevant codes duplicated across to match them. And at that point, I also was able to rename the child departments to their parent name. And then I needed to get all the codes and departments into one column each, so that the planned formula in Excel would be able to read them better. The checking of the code then, so as you can see here, there are over 2,000 field of research codes, for example, within the Research Ireland classifications, which is an awful lot for it to go through. So I wanted to filter out what codes weren't being used by us. So that was the next bit there, so that there was a smaller list to deal with. And then the calculations themselves. I used an Excel formula to count how many times each code appeared, and then where relevant, assign a higher level code that encompassed the majority of the research in that department. And then I picked the two top ones to put into the report. Nearly there, I promise. So just a few reflections on this. The sample size was small. We only used about 500 publications, so it was possible to do the manual interventions that I did. When you're working with much larger figures, it would take much longer and quite possibly wouldn't be feasible to do at some levels. I think it might be possible to automate some of this, given time, expertise, and appropriate technology access, but I don't have the experience in that area myself to say for sure. You'd also need to run the report, which is fine, but also redo the analysis in Excel every 2 years, because there'd be different publications to analyse at that point. The assignment of codes, as I mentioned before, was a difficulty because it was difficult to accurately pick a code in areas I was less familiar with. So my solution for dealing with that going forward is to actually spread more awareness of these codes among our staff. At the moment, they don't really know about this report and the importance of it. So I would like them to either look at the codes that I've already assigned and kind of verify that they are correct and descriptive of their research, or where they feel confident doing so, picking codes themselves because they know their research best. Perhaps I was a little too idealistic in what I was expecting, given that we're so new to using Pure. We've only been going through this project for about a year at this stage, and I thought it might be literally as simple as adding keywords to the outputs and then attaching them to the units, and the report would do everything else. And finally, I think some further investigation is needed into what other options there are for recording this information and generating reports on it, and I intend to continue with this in the hopes of finding something useful before the next report is due. So if anyone has any questions, or if anyone would like to tell me a better way of doing this, I'd be very grateful. But that's it from me. Thank you very much.
All right, any questions from the crowd? I do have one, but you first.
Thank you so much. And Kayleigh, that was an excellent presentation. So I too am from Ireland and need to do the survey every year. We didn't use Pure this year because we can't mandate Pure, first of all, for all of our research staff. So I would have been fearful that not all of our research staff were in Pure. I think I need to get around that now for the next survey and insist that even if they don't accept their Pure profile, that we bring in their data into Pure so we can run the report. I would also love to see from Elsevier a way of making certain things compulsory within Pure, because when you add things like that, if you have a classification, it's much easier if we actually get the researchers to do it themselves, as opposed to you having to go through 500 publications and put that in. But I found researchers will put in the bare minimum into Pure in order to get it saved. And we have the ISCID codes in there as well, because that's another thing that we have to link in with in order to do our reporting. And then we have the Research Ireland codes, Ireland. There's 2 different classifications required, so I'd love a way of trying to make them mandatory, either at research output stage or at, other kind of stages, at the profile stage even, because the profile of the researchers, you could run it by the code. So I don't know if that's, anything we can do to get things compulsory so that you can't save it, without actually having that included in it. But yeah, it's just a comment that, I too hope to use Pure for this going forward. We weren't there yet this year. It would have been too much work for us. But I think over the next kind of 18 months, even though it's only every 2 years, we're going to try and do something like yourself. So thanks for that.
Yes.
Hi, sorry, I'm from the UK. Have you tried using data stories for your report?
I didn't give it a lot of attempts. I suppose the data story I used really was a table, just the table format of it, to then bring it to Excel. I don't know, I didn't think it would look like it would work for what I was going for.
One of your attempts mentioned your outputs appeared in one cell, all of them.
Yes.
In a data story, you could have grouped them, and it would have made them all one row each per output.
Oh, okay.
That might have helped.
Yeah, thank you. That's very good. I'll look into that for sure.
Right. Other questions or comments? You want to see? Oh. Ah, you could have told me when I was up there. Yeah, I do.
So we also, I don't know if you looked into the expand functionality in reporting.
To make everything visible, yeah, I had to use that on them. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's the write preview. And
Yes.
the expand.
Oh, okay.
And what the expand does is, if you have, for example, you have 2 organization units on one line, it'll expand it to 2 lines.
Okay.
So you'll have the title twice, but
Yes.
you'll have it as 2 separate lines.
Okay.
And you can do that also on other content types. When you get one of these cells with multiple values in it, you can do the expand. Of course, you're going to have more lines in the data table, so you'll grow from 500 to maybe 3,000 or something like that. But it makes it easier in Excel afterwards to process it.
That would be great. Yeah. See, I should have just asked you, Jens.
Yes, you should.
That's a life lesson for you there. Just ask Jens.
Jens knows the answer to everything.
Most things. Any other questions or comments, please, for Kayleigh? Doesn't seem to be. Oh, Hong?
So I'm a customer success consultant, so probably you're at the very last stage of the implementation, not yet handed over yet, right? Probably you need the training on reporting, so we can have discussion. And the second thing is that this requirement is for all the Irish.
Yes.
Probably we can think of something there for every customer to do it together.
That would be great. Thank you.
You. And with that, I think the lunch is ready for you guys, right? Thank you, Kayleigh.